Will Boris Johnson's last-minute intervention make a difference for the election? The former Prime Minister addressed the Conservative supporters in London last night in a last-ditch attempt to prevent a Labour landslide. The former MP for Uxbridge was met with cheers at the crowd that chanted his name. You can hear them now. And then he told supporters that it would be, and I quote, the height of insanity to vote for Labour. And he said this about Keir Starmer's party.
Do we want this kind of madness? Do we want ever higher taxes? Do we want more wokery imposed on our schools? And yet this is coming now, this week. This gigantic, unless we change it, this gigantic Labour majority pregnant with horrors.
Later, Boris Johnson warned that a vote for other parties would be a vote for Putin.
Those other parties turn out to be full of Kremlin crawlers who actually make excuses for Putin's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. They say Putin's a good operator, puffing their cheroots. Putin's a good operator, runs a tight ship, you know. Well, if that's what they mean by a man who shoots journalists and poisons his opponents and murders thousands of innocent Ukrainian civilians, I say shame on them. They can achieve nothing at this election except to usher in the most left-wing Labour government since the war with a huge majority, and we must not let it happen. Don't let the Putinistas deliver the Corbynistas.
What a phrase there. Lots to unravel. Carole, will any of it make a difference?
Well, I don't think it's going to make a difference to the final result, no. However, I'm so angry with the Tories, actually, because, one, for what they did to him in the first place, but two, why drag him out 2 days before the election is coming? The guy can deliver speeches in the way that no other Tory politician can. Sunak in the whole of this election has not delivered a speech like that. It was rabble-rousing, it was electrifying. He gets people on side in the same way, whether you love him or not, as Nigel Farage. He can galvanise people. And I just think to bring him out now, 48 hours before the election, it's not, it's 24 hours, isn't she? Before the election, it makes me angrier with him. And it just shows, Rishi should have asked for his help weeks ago. But not now, weeks ago.
He was busy over the last few weeks on holiday, celebrating his birthday.
I am sure if Rishi Sunak had said, come and help, he would have come and helped. But I'm like, this shows to me why Sunak is not the man to lead the Tories. He's weak, he's ineffectual. I think he's a very good bloke. I think he works very hard, all the rest of it. I don't doubt for 1 second he's a decent man. But he's not a leader. And that guy is a leader. And if we'd had more of that and less of Sunak, it might be a different story.
Jacqui, it's interesting that in this event yesterday, it was kicked off by Michael Gove, again, someone who's not standing for re-election, Boris Johnson, not standing, and then we had Rishi Sunak sort of close it all off. What would be the thinking, if Carole's right, that they didn't ask him to sort of join the campaign? Let's say he was willing to put his holiday aside and come and roll his sleeves up and help the Conservatives. We don't know if he would have wanted to. But what's the thinking behind what happened last night?
Well, I think the thinking behind not having him up to this point was, let's not forget Labour's charge against the Tories and their promise is we'll get rid of the chaos that you've experienced over the last 4 or 5 years. Numerous Prime Ministers, too many to mention, Liz Truss crashing the economy, Boris Johnson, Partygate and all the other things that led to his downfall. And actually what we need is sort of Rishi looking sensible at least, and that might get us through the election. Clearly that has failed. So I think this is a sort of last-ditch attempt to move it up a notch to get the sort of interest that is being shown by the fact that we're talking about it this morning, to remind people that Boris Johnson did win the 2019 election. Carole is right to the extent that he gets attention. And I mean, I hate that type of rhetoric, but he gets attention from the way that he talks about things. And he obviously G'd people up. He must be feeling, I would have thought, given the Tory campaign so far, pretty depressed, actually.
You talk to people on the doorsteps, and I've talked to a lot of people who are knocking on doors, and disaffected Tory voters are saying if Boris was still there, they'd vote. Now, if they've heard that weeks ago, why didn't they bring him back weeks ago? This, to me, I think...
But bring him back how? Do you mean get him to stand as an MP?
Just to campaign.
As a campaigner?
Yeah, and maybe, and if he made a difference to that, then get him back as an MP. I don't think he's finished by any stretch. I think he will come back at some point, maybe when the Tories have to reinvent themselves, which they're going to have to because they're going to be in the toilet after tomorrow. But he might lessen the damage. Who knows? I think they said something like 20% of people who voted, Tories who voted in the 2019 election, still haven't decided. They're walking to the polling station tomorrow, still not having decided.
Do you think Carole and Jacqui, get your thoughts on this? Do you think he was brought back because of fear of reform? Now, he didn't name reform or Nigel Farage.
He kind of did.
Well, but he didn't speak his name. But he talked about Kremlin crawlers. He talked about people who think that Putin was a good operator, and it's a fact that Nigel Farage did say that one of the leaders he admires most was Vladimir Putin for the way he operates. Is this a last-ditch attempt to maybe save some of those Conservative voters wanting to punish the Conservatives by voting reform?
Absolutely.
Yeah, look, my experience in the constituency that I used to represent, where I've been doing some campaigning, is that the Tories have been going for reform ever since the very first moment, because they understand that people who are disenchanted or who still haven't made up their minds, and Carole's right, that there's quite a large number of people, there always is, but disproportionately in this election, they are former Conservative voters. If they vote reform, that gives, in many seats, Labour a better chance of winning. I will just say, though, I do think I now think Labour will win tomorrow. I've always been quite cautious about it. But they will only win if people vote for them. And who knows, perhaps seeing Boris Johnson back on the telly might clinch a few Labour voters to make sure that they get out and vote. Or it might have the opposite effect,
because a YouGov poll says today that if 34,000 people in marginal seats switch to Tory instead of Reform or instead of whatever else, that could actually half Labour's majority from 200 to 100. They're saying if 132,000 vote Tory, it could stop the majority altogether. So that's kind of, I suspect, what he's doing up there. But it should have been sooner, not the day before the election. It's crazy.
OK, let's hear what people are saying at home. Michael's got in touch from Dover. Michael, good morning. Do you think Boris Johnson and his speech yesterday would make a difference?
Would have done if it had come at the start of the campaign.
Right,
I agree with Carole.
Yeah.
Too little, too late. The Labour Party have had a free hand to peddle a load of tripe. Starmer can't be trusted. He's proved that with his migration policy and wanting to scrap Rwanda. When the EU are moving to the right, Starmer's prepared to open the doors. And with the militancy towards migrants throughout the EU, more of the migrants are going to come from the EU into Britain. Right. And Starmer's doing nothing to dissuade them.
Well, Starmer's policy is slightly different. You're right, he is going to scrap Rwanda, but he wants to tackle the gangs. That's what the Labour Party is saying. But let's focus on Boris Johnson for a second, though, Michael. Do you not think, though, that what Jacqui was saying, that if you'd had Boris Johnson at the campaign trail from the beginning, you're giving Labour a nice big stick to whack the Conservatives over the head with constantly, because you're saying, look, how can you have this guy here where actually your party kicked him out? Let's not forget, the Parliamentary Committee found him guilty of lying to Parliament. Would it really have been an asset for the Conservatives to have someone like Boris Johnson on the campaign trail?
I think it would. And your point you're saying about the Conservatives kicked him out, let's not forget, Starmer was backing Jeremy Corbyn, saying he'd be an excellent Prime Minister, and has now got the gall and contempt of the electorate to turn around and say, no, I wasn't really serious about that, I just wanted votes.
Sure, but Starmer also kicked Jeremy Corbyn out of the Labour Party. But you keep wanting to talk about Starmer,
well, that kind of says a lot about him, really.
It does say a lot about him, and all these things to be addressed. But I want to focus on Boris Johnson and whether or not he really would be an asset to the Conservatives. I mean, you agree with Michael, don't you? You think he would have been a bigger asset?
I think you're kind of right. If he'd come in at the start of the campaign, it would have given Starmer a stick to beat him with. Had he come halfway through, what we realised about Starmer was he's been so opaque about what he's going to do and not saying what he's going to do that, he's going to have a mandate, and he's not going to have a mandate from the British people to do what he's going to do because he hasn't said it, and he's not given them the chance to vote against that. So I think if Boris had come in, maybe it was a week and a half ago, it would have made a difference if he did knocked on doors. Because people's, whatever, when you look back at what he was accused of, okay, but people have moved on from that, and I know people who died, who lost people in COVID, they're never going to move on from that. But I think in politics, politicians do move on, and I just think when you look at the Tory party now, there are no characters, there are no big personalities, there is no one to drag you in. He could have done that.
The point is, Carole, he could have come back at any point. What he wants is that sort of adulation and that sort of platform. Theresa May, we saw her on Twitter just this week, out knocking on doors, ringing one of those doorbells where you film people, doing the legwork that activists across the country in all parties have been doing. And in the Tory party, probably have been having a pretty torrid time about it. And she was there beside them, supporting them, not grandstanding.
But if you think the way Boris was treated and kicked out, it's kind of amazing he's come back at all to support the man who helped kick him out. Well, but I don't think she went through the same kind of the same kind of nastiness that he did. But anyway,
I've got to go to the break. Apologies for that. Thank you, Michael, for starting us off. After the break, more of your calls on whether Boris Johnson's 11th hour intervention was enough to make a difference for the Conservatives. Give us a call now. Welcome if you just joined us. We're live on Channel 5 and My 5. Jacqui Smith, Carole Malone are still with me, and we're going to be returning to your calls on whether Boris Johnson's last-minute intervention will make a difference to the election. 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. Let's go straight to the lines and speak to Jewel. Jewel, good morning.
Hiya.
Do you think it'll make a difference?
Oh, I hope not. I think we can't stand any more of the Conservatives. They've just destroyed this country. Nothing works. Nothing. And both. I mean, I've already sent my vote off. I've voted for Labour, but I don't know. I'm not happy about my vote either. I think the Labour local MPs who run the local council rubbish in Brent. I just think the whole thing's a mess. I think anybody off the street could do a better job.
Julie, you're right, but who's going to create the biggest mess in government, do you think?
Oh, well, I think Starmer's probably going to be the worst of the two enemies.
Yeah. So who will you vote for then?
Well, if I could, I'd vote for my friend Amy Lynch.
Oh.
She's standing as an MP in Wimbledon, but she can't even get in the local debates. They've got it on lockdown. They won't let anybody, give her a chance.
Okay, Jill.
Because they want it to be between them.
It sounds to me that you're sort of disaffected with everyone. Do you think, though, that someone like Boris Johnson makes a difference in politics? You saw his speech yesterday. Do you think that we need more people like him? What kind of politician do you want to see on the ballot box, on the ballot paper, I should say?
I would like to see more people like my friend Amy Lynch.
All right, OK, fine. Jewel, I'm going to leave it there because now we're going to have to read all the candidates in your friend's constituency in just a moment. Is this going to be an issue? We asked that question about the 2001 election being the lowest turnout. Any fears of that tomorrow, do you think?
The reason it was the lowest turnout was because people just assumed that Labour was going to win and therefore felt we don't have to go and vote. And that's why Labour have been really hammering this message of if you want change, you've got to vote for it, because I think there would be a worry, and Carole sort of spelt out some of the numbers. I think Labour is going to win, but there will be some seats that will be decided by whether or not people actually turn out and do vote or don't vote.
Yeah.
And so, all I would say to people is, if you want change, you do have to go and vote. But
do you not think a lot of people won't, Jacqui, because they don't like Julie? She doesn't know who to vote for. She doesn't know which party. She doesn't want to vote for Labour. She doesn't want to vote for the Tories. I think a lot of people think the best thing to do is stay at home. And then you're right, it's not, my God. People died for us to get the vote. We should vote. It's the very least we can do. But I just think people don't know where to go. And they don't want to waste the vote on what they say is a waste of vote on the Greens or something.
It is certainly true, and it's my impression from knocking on doors as well, that there is not a massive wave of enthusiasm and people going, I'm desperate to get and queue down the polling station in order to vote. I mean, I hope people will be queuing tomorrow. There isn't that enormous enthusiasm. What there is a sort of real almost sense of despair about what's happened to the country and politics over the last 4 or 5 years, which is why I think people think somebody sensible like Keir Starmer may be what we need at
Do you think people think he's sensible? I don't think the country has an appetite for him at all. I think they're just so angry with the Tories they'll have him because they don't want the Tories. But I just think, he's proved himself in this campaign. He can't answer a straight question, Jacqui. He can't.
Let me pause you there just to bring in the callers in. We'll continue this, of course, in our next part, where we're going to be talking about who would make the best Prime Minister. So I'm sure we're going to get into the characters of both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. But let's hear from Kimberly in Essex on the point of Boris Johnson. He gave a big speech yesterday. Kimberly, do you think that's enough to give the Conservatives a little bit of a push?
Hiya, morning. Well, yes. As a transgender woman, I've been for 35 years. I'm normally a Labour voter all the way because their trans policies are beneficial for me and my friends. But when I saw Boris this morning, I'm like, oh, hold on a minute. Boris has got that charisma. He's got that X factor, that thing, isn't he? Now I'm not sure.
But you know that Boris is not standing for election, right, Kimberly?
I know. The Wally. He should have got with Rishi Sunak and swallowed his pride a little bit and campaigned together, because I think they would have made a good team together. I'm wavering now. I'm not sure what to do, because, yes, he can be a bit of a Wally and he has done some really bad things. But he's got that thing, isn't he? That attraction. He's got that factor.
But this is so interesting, Kimberly. You, as a trans woman, are saying that because the Labour Party is supporting you. I mean, it's going to bring in lots of policies that will support you. And yet, interestingly, you say you would still go. You're thinking now of going for the Tories.
But doesn't it also say something about Boris Johnson that people are perfectly willing to say he's a Wally? And yet they can sort of see the attraction. I cannot see it. I don't want a Wally running my country.
No, he's not
we've had too many.
I don't think Kimberly means that. He just said he's got charisma. That's what we're saying before. He can lead people. He can bring people to him. And the Tories have got no one like that currently.
All right, Kimberly, thank you for that. Let's take another. Stephen in Liverpool. Stephen, good morning. Has Boris done enough? Can he do enough?
Good morning, first of all, for the panel. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. No, I don't think he's done enough. I don't think he's going to affect the result at all. But I do think that him coming on last minute, desperation affects people's feelings and the way that they've seen the way that the Tories have handled all of the last few years. For example, my mum was in a nursing home at the time of Partygate, and I could not go and see her. I saw her through video. I went to the door. I was looking from inside, and I couldn't actually physically go and see her as a result of the farce that was going on at Westminster. The Tories, basically like the game of whack-a-mole, where they hammer them down, they keep popping up every time. And Dominic Cummings, all of that scandal was basically voting against him, his own Prime Minister. So it's all this Tory infighting that we've had to put up with. And then the EU £350 million a week bus that Boris Johnson was driving around in, which was all lies as well. I just think they need to go.
It's interesting, isn't it, that for some people, Boris comes with all of that, the Partygate, lying to Parliament, proroguing Parliament, the way he left Parliament. But for others, they see as delivering Brexit, winning that thumping majority over Jeremy Corbyn, the speeches, the charisma. He really is the Marmite politician, isn't he?
Totally, and I suspect that he reinforces what you already feel. So for somebody like Stephen, who's been through that horrible experience, that will simply remind him of all the things that were going wrong with Partygate, with the way in which Boris was responding. For other people who perhaps voted Tory in 2019, when, you're right, he did achieve a big victory for the Tories.
And let's not forget, he won London Mayor twice in London, which is not a majority Conservative
And I don't know whether you remember, back to 2019, I remember Corbyn, I thought Corbyn was going to win. I mean, the feeling in the country, it just felt like he was going to... Seriously, I was terrified he was going to win.
In the 2019 election?
Yes.
Right.
And the feeling, the talk around it was he was... And I couldn't believe that result. In fact, neither could Boris, if you remember, he was jumping up and down like a lunatic. He couldn't believe it either. OK, let's take another call. Dave in Lancaster. Dave, good morning. Does Boris Johnson, will he be able to make a difference for the Conservatives?
No. He's the same as Rishi Sunak, and I'm afraid you're asking the wrong question. The question is, why has Rishi Sunak got it wrong, and why has any other political party over the decades always got it wrong? Because if they got it right, they wouldn't be out of power. And there's things happening behind the scenes at a higher pay grade than Rishi Sunak's that's stopping from doing the things he wants to do.
Dave,
that's what you need to talk about.
OK, but Dave, do you think that there comes a time, and it came for the Labour government as well, that after you've been in power for 12, 13, 14, 15 years, that it naturally will happen? People will say, look, whatever you've been doing, we just want something different. Is that what's happening with the Conservatives?
It's what's happening, but it won't make any difference. In 5 years' time, you'll be saying to the Conservatives, asking them whether they can do a better job than Labour.
OK. All right, Dave, I'll leave it there. Thank you for that. Now, look, one of our callers earlier, Jewel, mentioned a candidate standing in Wimbledon. So now you can see the full list of candidates standing in that constituency. I mean, it is fascinating that we've had all these calls of maybe it will make a difference and won't make a difference. I can tell you today in the morning round, Mel Stride has been the Conservative MP.
Again?
Yeah, the Conservative spokesperson. And the language is really interesting. He's basically pitching for votes to give them enough votes to be an effective opposition. Yeah. I can't remember a general election where one of the big two parties has basically given up and said, of course we're not going to win, just give us enough votes so we can be effective in opposition.
And they haven't only just given up, they gave up, how many, was it about 3 weeks ago when Grant Shapps started talking about this super majorities
well, look,
idea?
We're going to be discussing all that after the break.